The war room was full. Every general, every intelligence chief, every cabinet minister who matters in a conflict of this magnitude was seated at that table. The emergency session had been called because Iran had just launched what its own commanders were calling the most decisive wave of the entire operation. Missiles with 2-ton warheads, a brand new solid-fuel ballistic missile confirmed in combat deployment for the very first time. Coordinated strikes from Lebanon timed to the second. Targets that were not military bases or radar installations this time. The targets were the command centers, the decision-making infrastructure, the nerve system of the entire Israeli war machine. Every second counted. Every decision made in that room in those hours would determine the trajectory of this conflict for weeks, possibly months. And Benjamin Netanyahu, the man who launched this war, the man who has stood in front of cameras during every single previous military crisis, projecting authority and commanding the room, was not there. He was declared formally absent. Defense Minister Israel Katz took the chair. The War Cabinet conducted its most critical session without the man who started it all, and nobody in the Israeli government offered a single explanation for where he was. Let that sink in for just one moment before I take you through everything I am about to show you. Because what is happening right now in Tel Aviv, in Tehran, in Washington, and in the markets pricing every signal coming out of this conflict is not what you are being told it is. The official version has holes in it large enough to drive a Kabar-Shikan missile through. I am going to show you exactly where those holes are, separate what is confirmed from what is contested. And by the end of this analysis, you are going to understand why the events of the last 48 hours represent a turning point that no headline has fully captured. Stay with me. This changes everything. Let me start with what is not in dispute, because in a conflict this volatile, the first casualty is always verified information, and I refuse to trade in speculation when the documented facts are already alarming enough. What is confirmed? Netanyahu did not attend the Emergency Security Cabinet meeting. He was formally declared absent. Defense Minister Israel Katz presided over the session in his place. Israeli media, not Iranian state television, not IRGC-aligned channels, not opposition politicians with axes to grind, but Israeli media, outlets with direct knowledge of security cabinet protocols, reported this and described it as historically anomalous. The Times of Israel documented it. Israeli journalists who cover the security establishment for a living said clearly and without ambiguity that a sitting prime minister does not miss a security cabinet session during an active military conflict. That protocol exists for a reason, and that reason is precisely this moment, when the country is absorbing the most intense strike package it has faced in this entire conflict and needs visible, credible, documented command at the top. Now I want you to think about something. Think about every previous Israeli military crisis of the last 2 decades. The 12-day war, the Gaza operations. Every escalation, every bombing campaign, every moment when rockets were falling and sirens were wailing across Israeli cities. What did Netanyahu do in every single one of those situations without exception? He appeared on camera, immediately, repeatedly, standing at a podium or in front of a war room backdrop, projecting command, projecting control, projecting the image of a leader who is physically present and personally directing the response. That is not an accident of personality. That is a deliberate, consistent political strategy he has executed without deviation across more than a decade in power. He understands better than almost any living politician that in a security crisis, the visibility of leadership is itself a strategic asset. It stabilizes your population, signals resolve to your adversaries, reassures your allies, and insulates you politically from opposition waiting for a moment of weakness. Benjamin Netanyahu has never, not once, allowed a significant security crisis to pass without putting himself in front of a camera within hours. Until now. So when the most dangerous 48-hour period of this entire conflict produces not a podium appearance, not a war room briefing, not a direct address to the Israeli people, but instead a brief clip filmed behind a curtain in an undisclosed location, followed by cafeteria footage that immediately generated intense scrutiny from independent fact-checkers. When that is the response from one of the most media-savvy political operators in the world during the single most critical moment of his leadership, that deviation from every established pattern is itself an analytical data point. I am not telling you what it means. I am telling you that it is real. It is documented, and it demands an explanation that has not been provided. Here is what else is confirmed and what remains contested. Shortly after Netanyahu's absence became publicly known, Iranian state media and IRGC-aligned channels moved rapidly to construct a narrative suggesting something significantly more consequential had occurred than Israel was prepared to acknowledge. Pakistani media, including the Express Tribune, reported that a drone strike had produced results more serious than what Israeli official communications were characterizing. Chinese, Russian, and Turkish outlets carried similar framing. Western media stated that Netanyahu is alive, and his absence had an unspecified operational explanation. But here is the detail nobody is connecting properly. An Indian journalist working for a major outlet was arrested. Confirmed by Gulf media. Corroborated by multiple regional sources. The reported sequence. The journalist was transmitting live from a location where Netanyahu was physically present, identified the prime minister on camera during that live broadcast, and shortly after, a strike was reported in the area. The journalist was arrested for exposing Israeli national security. If the official justification for that arrest is accurate, it means Netanyahu was at a specific sensitive location whose coordinates were effectively disclosed in real time to anyone watching that broadcast. The arrest itself is confirmed. The operational sequence connecting that disclosure to what followed is contested. I cannot resolve it with available evidence. But the combination of that arrest, the 48-hour information gap, the cafeteria footage, and the formal declaration of absence from the most important security cabinet meeting of this war is not a pattern that a healthy, fully commanding prime minister produces. Whatever explains it, that reality stands. Now let me take you through what Iran actually did on the night of March 14th, because the weapons systems deployed in this wave represent a categorical escalation beyond anything previously committed to this conflict. The IRGC confirmed the launch of what it designated as the 54th wave of Operation True Promise 4, and this wave was categorically different from the previous 53 in one specific and critical way. For the first time in this conflict, Iran deployed ultra-heavy ballistic missiles against what it described as Israeli decision-making centers. The systems used included the Kabar-Shikan, a missile armed with a 2-ton conventional warhead, the heaviest conventional payload in Iran's entire arsenal, alongside the Sejjil, a solid-fuel strategic ballistic missile confirmed in combat deployment for the very first time during this operation. The Sejjil represents a fundamentally different category of threat. Every previous major salvo used liquid fuel systems that require a preparation window before launch, a fueling process that takes time, during which satellite reconnaissance can detect the activity. That detection window is the gap between warning and impact. A solid fuel missile eliminates that gap entirely. It can be fired within minutes of the launch decision. No fueling exposure. No thermal signature of pre-launch preparation visible from orbit. The time between the command decision and the moment the warhead descends on its target collapses from hours to minutes. The Sejjil's range covers every American and Israeli military installation in the region. Every single one. Its confirmed combat deployment on the night of March 14th was not an inventory accident. It was a deliberate signal that Iranian commanders have made a conscious decision to commit a higher tier of strategic capability than at any prior point in this conflict. And the question you need to ask yourself, the question every defense planner in Washington and Tel Aviv is asking right now, is this: if Iran just revealed its Sejjil in combat for the first time, what else is it holding back? Leave your answer in the comments, because that question is going to define the next chapter of this war. And then there is the targeting logic, which is where this becomes truly unprecedented. When you target military hardware, you degrade a country's capacity to fight. That is conventional military targeting. Damaging, costly, strategically significant. But when you target decision-making infrastructure, command centers, communications relay stations, intelligence processing facilities, the physical locations where military orders are generated, transmitted, and coordinated, you are doing something categorically different. You are not trying to break the weapons. You are trying to break the organizational coherence that makes weapons effective. You are attacking the brain, not the muscle. You are trying to produce a condition where an army still has missiles and jets and tanks, but cannot function as a unified entity because the communication architecture coordinating those assets has been degraded beyond operational effectiveness. That is the targeting logic Iran committed to on the night of March 14th. And when you combine that targeting logic with an active 48-hour information gap around the physical whereabouts of the man at the very top of the command structure that Iran was targeting, I need you to sit with that combination, because it is not something strategic analysts will walk past lightly. Simultaneously, while the Kibar Shikan warheads were descending, Hezbollah launched its coordinated assault from southern Lebanon. And here's the detail that is the most underreported element of this entire night. Israeli military sources, not Iranian propaganda, not Hezbollah press releases, but Israeli military analysts cited in the Israeli press, described the level of command, control, and synchronization demonstrated in the Hezbollah component as inconsistent with the characterization of Hezbollah as a degraded and weakened force that Israeli government communications had been presenting for months. They did not describe a militia getting lucky. They described an organization demonstrating high-level operational coherence, synchronizing its strikes to coincide with the Iranian primary wave, hitting targets chosen to maximize stress on Israeli defensive systems already saturated by the main assault. The official Israeli narrative had been clear. Hezbollah's command and control had been disrupted beyond significant function, its large-scale coordination capacity permanently reduced. The organization that struck from Lebanon on the night of March 14th did not correspond to that description in any way that the Israeli military analysts doing the actual assessment were willing to validate. That narrative did not survive the night of March 14th, and what that means for every family living in the communities of northern Israel, communities the Israeli army itself has told its own soldiers not to patrol because it cannot guarantee their safety, is something that no official communication is addressing honestly. Now let me talk about the Iron Dome, because this is where we enter territory that official communications from Tel Aviv are navigating extremely carefully. During the 54th wave, Iron Dome fired 31 interceptors. 31. And the missiles still hit. Ben Gurion Airport, the primary international gateway of the most heavily defended small nation on Earth, was struck. Multiple warheads reached decision-making infrastructure in central Israel. The interception rate against ultra-heavy ballistic missiles is categorically different from the rates Iron Dome achieves against shorter-range rocket systems. And the gap between the system's demonstrated performance against this class of weapon and the public confidence built around Israeli air defense over the last decade is a gap that every adversary in this region is now calculating with fresh data. This is not an argument that Iron Dome is worthless. It is an argument that its effectiveness envelope has specific limits at the high end of adversary capability, and those limits were documented in combat on the night of March 14th. The perception consequences of that fact extend far beyond Israel, across every regional actor currently updating their own strategic calculations. Deterrence is not a function of pure military capability. It is a function of perception, of the adversary's belief that the costs of action outweigh the potential gains. When the actions of the last 48 hours are processed by every actor in this region calculating their own position and interests, the perception being updated is not the one that strengthens Israel's deterrence posture. That is the strategic reality that no press briefing is prepared to say out loud. Here is the economic dimension, because it reaches every person watching this, regardless of proximity to the conflict. Israel's war is costing its economy approximately $3 billion per week in direct losses. The American side is running at approximately $1 billion per day. Combined, roughly $10 billion per week is being consumed by a conflict in which neither side has publicly declared what conditions would end it. Now add this. The Brent crude price chart froze. Not during market hours. The crude market is continuous. Public-facing price data stopped updating in real time for approximately 2 days. Anyone monitoring energy markets noticed. When the Strait of Hormuz has been closed for 15 consecutive days, when a major international airport has been struck, when Gulf energy infrastructure has been hit across multiple countries, when commercial shipping has been eliminated from the primary regional maritime corridor, in that environment, a freeze in publicly displayed crude price data is not a server outage. It is a signal that something in the information architecture of energy markets was being managed in a way that normal public data flow could not accommodate. I am not speculating about motive. I am telling you it happened. It was anomalous, and the timing was not coincidental. Here is what I need you to carry forward from everything I have shown you today. 3 things are simultaneously true right now. First, the information environment around this conflict is being actively managed by every party with stakes in the outcome. Iranian state media is constructing a maximalist narrative. Israeli official communications are constructing a minimalist one. The truth lives in the documented evidence, and the documented evidence is alarming enough without embellishment in either direction. Second, the events of the night of March 14th represent a qualitative escalation that has not been matched by any equivalent de-escalatory move from either side. The Sejjil's combat debut, the 2-ton warheads, the targeting of decision-making infrastructure, the demonstrated Hezbollah coordination. These are not a continuation of previous operational tempo. They are a step change. Third, the 48-hour information gap around the prime minister of a nuclear-armed state during the most dangerous period of its most significant military conflict in decades is analytically significant regardless of what ultimately explains it. History does not give us many examples of leaders who were fully operational, fully in command, and physically uncompromised, who communicated that status through cafeteria footage while their war cabinet met without them. The deterrence framework that has governed Israeli security strategy for decades rested on 2 pillars: the belief that Israel could defend itself effectively, and the belief that the consequences of attacking would be so catastrophic as to make any attempt irrational. The night of March 14th tested both pillars simultaneously. 31 interceptors fired. Missiles still reached Ben Gurion. Ultra-heavy warheads struck decision-making infrastructure in central Israel for the first time in this conflict. A second front from Lebanon demonstrated coordination that official communications had described as already eliminated. And the Prime Minister was absent from the room where the response was being planned. Both components of that framework were stress-tested in the same night, and the results were not what the framework requires to remain credible. And the most chilling question, the one that everyone from Langley to the Kiryat to the bunkers under Tehran is sitting with right now, is not what happened on March 14th. It is what Iran does next, knowing everything it now knows about where the gaps in that framework actually are. I am going to leave you with one question, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments, because every response I read shapes how I build the next analysis. Here it is. What do you actually believe explains Netanyahu's absence from that war cabinet meeting? Not what the official account says, not what you hope. What do you believe, based on the pattern of behavior this man has demonstrated across 15 years in Israeli politics, and the specific deviation from that pattern that we are documenting right now? Because the answer to that question determines everything about what comes next. It determines the chain of command for the Israeli response. It determines the credibility of whatever deterrence posture Israel projects in the coming days. It determines whether the adversaries across the table are calculating against a unified and operationally intact Israeli leadership structure, or against something more fractured and more vulnerable than the official communications are acknowledging. Evidence first, analysis second. But right now, the evidence is pointing in a direction that the official version of this story has not caught up with yet. And when it does, when a confirmed, documented, unambiguous public appearance resolves the questions this analysis has raised, when the full accounting of what the 54th wave actually struck becomes publicly available, when the logic connecting the state of emergency extension, the arrested journalist, and the cafeteria footage finally becomes clear, when any of that breaks, this channel will be here connecting those dots in real time, with the same standards of evidence and the same refusal to substitute comfortable narrative for documented reality that has guided every analysis I have brought to you. Subscribe, activate notifications, because this story is not finished, not by a long way. And the next 48 hours are going to tell us more about where this conflict is truly headed than the last 3 weeks combined.